Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm thrilled you can join us today. We're going to talk about bringing the past to life by using archived films and how we can create kind of these living memories to really engage and build a sense of community and connection. But before I introduce you to our guest today, I always just like to remind people to please check out alzheimerspeaks.com. You can get so many free resources there. We have an archive page of many different things. So from the radio shows to dementia chats to memory cafes to dementia in the arts, dementia-friendly communities, some tools that you can use, etc. So please check us out there. And while you're on Alzheimer Speaks, don't forget to check out our book tab and look at Betty the Bald Chicken, Lessons in How to Care. The other shout out I want to give is to Dementia Map, which has over 150 different categories that you can search. Lots of great resources. Again, free of charge. Neither site is going to ask you for personal information. So just go tap into that. Let's go and introduce you to our guest now. Well, Brian, I am so excited to have you on the show. We've been planning this for quite a while, and like everything, life kind of takes over at times. So, first of all, welcome for being able to be with us on the show. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Laurie. I'm equally enthusiastic and excited.
Wonderful. Do you mind just introducing yourself? You can do a much better job than I can.
Yes, my name is Brian Norris, and I have spent most of my career working as an international media lawyer in the film, television, and media worlds. Part of my career with the American film industry, and then in later years running my own boutique consultancy around the world. But more recently, over the last really 15 years almost, I have been a social entrepreneur, and it really developed out of, again, my background and the recognition that there were all sorts of interesting ways to use archive film with older people.
And so you are now the founder of Living Memories, which is what we're really going to highlight today, which I'm excited to talk about. So first, thanks for creating that. And I think people are going to see as we talk why this is such an important endeavor and how it's changed people's lives.
Yes, it's certainly having an impact in not only the ways that my wife and I originally thought that it would, but we're getting interest from all sorts of other parts of society and all sorts of different people. It's going beyond where I thought it would. And we're hoping that it will benefit many, many people, not only in the UK, but around the world gradually.
Yeah, I hope it comes to the U.S. because it is really powerful. And, I always say what's good for dementia is good for basically all of life. And I think with what you've developed, there's so many different ways that your product can help people and help families. But we'll talk about that as we go here. I always like to start and ask if you have been personally touched by dementia in your own family or circle of friends.
Yes, not in family, but certainly in the circle of friends. And that was, in fact, how Living Memories came to life. My wife happens to own a film archive from the 1940s up until the 1990s, which she inherited from her late husband, who was a well-known documentary film producer in the UK in the post-war years. And when I met her and her husband before he died, I was fascinated by that film archive. And when Leonora, my now wife, and I started living together, she was already living in Cornwall, in an isolated location in North Cornwall in the UK, very rural area. And when I moved into the area, it became clear that there were quite a few people who became our friends, were getting older, as we all do gradually. But they were also living in isolation, both because the nature of the geography of North Cornwall is quite wild and very rural. And it was also the fact, I think, that they were having people living on their own, their partner probably having died a few years earlier. And as they got older, there was not much for them to do. They had no choice but to have their own car to get into town, which was 6 miles away from where we were living. And as they lost the capability of driving through loss of eyesight or whatever, they became more withdrawn. And many of our friends were getting into a state where we were getting concerned about them. And we finally realized, took perhaps longer than it should have done, to recognize that many of the archive films that we had available could be of direct interest to older people, people who were born during the Second World War or after the Second World War, or maybe even before the Second World War. And so we began to show one or two of the films to some of the friends, and it was immediately obvious that they were stimulated by what they saw. It didn't seem to matter which of the films we looked at. They're mostly information films from those eras. Some of them were government information films, as they were called, which were really propaganda type films from the wartime, and many other types of programs from the 1940s onwards. And the possibilities for using the films for the broader range of older people began to form in our minds, and we started looking beyond our local community and thinking, well, there are probably things here we could do with older people and with young people as well. So we started talking to the local schools, and they were interested in us beginning to work with them to put together some educational material, taking clips from some of the films. I remember one of those projects was about respect for other people, which was quite an interesting exercise, because it was possible to go back to the 1940s, let's say, or the 1930s, and choose clips from some of the films in Leonora's archive. And the way that people behaved towards each other was very different in those days. People were much more formal, etc. Probably they were black and white films as well. Maybe it was an office scene or even a shop scene in a grocer's store or something. And so Leonora, I remember, spent about 40 hours trawling through hundreds of films to find clips that could be used. And these came together in a video, which the format of which was determined by the students in the school. So we went in and said, here we are. We've got about 40 clips for you, and it's up to you to decide how we put these all together. Let's discuss how it should be done. And so that process went on and ended up with an educational DVD at the time it was, together with a printed reminiscence, with a guide to show them, with topics to discuss and questions to ask, etc. And then we began to think about the possibility of getting students to sit down and interview older people. So we taught them how to do interviews, both audio and video interview, with the school, or through the school and through various scout and guide groups and other organizations. And so we then got into a project working with the Truro, which was the main city in Cornwall, through the public library. They had a lot of public records relating to the wartime period. So we put a project together which was about evacuees to Cornwall during the Second World War, when there were thousands of children who came to live in Cornwall, coming from London and other cities in the UK to take them away from the risks of the bombing, etc. And so we put a project together with some of our archive films and the interviews with people who had been evacuees or who had hosted evacuees during the war. That was very successful. Then we thought, well, maybe because there are these organizations in the UK called memory cafes in numerous communities where those living with dementia and their carers come together every couple of weeks, perhaps, or once a month, and they sit together and do crafts and chat about various activities and memories, etc. And we thought, well, maybe our films might be useful for them. And so we spoke to the people who organized all the memory cafes across Cornwall at that time. That was about, I think there were about 30 memory cafes. And they said, wow, when they saw the films, we'd love to have access to these. And they then
ask you, was Norms McNamara one of the people that you talked to? Because I know he used to live in Devon and Cronwell, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he was in Devon. I'm aware of. I haven't seen him. Was not aware that he had been in Cornwall. But
and I could be mistaken. I just remember those two. He was very active in.
Yes, definitely. But he was not involved in this. But we were introduced by to the person in the health service in Cornwall, mm-hmm. who was in charge of all long-term conditions, including dementia. And we showed her several of the films, and she was equally blown over and said, look, you've got to see how we might be able to use these films most effectively with in the memory cafes and in care homes, etc., in Cornwall, since we were living in Cornwall, which is a very, very large county in the UK, in the southwest tip of the UK, and very spread out, and total isolation in pretty well across Cornwall. And so we were encouraged to spend a couple of years actually visiting all the memory cafes, care homes, and community hospitals and other organizations working with older people across Cornwall. And so Leonore and I visited many of them and were just amazed by the responses that we received. We would go along to these groups, which were held sometimes in cities like Truro, or in small communities on the moors, where there was no Wi-Fi or anything at all that one could use other than a projector and 16 mil projector and screen. And so we got the films out and we showed them. If there were DVD facilities, we would use those. And in every case, there were maybe 20 to 30 people present. And I would say almost in every case, at the end of each session, we'd have a chat with the person who was running the group, and they would say, that's the first time Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so has ever spoken in our group. And it was because there was something in the film that they had seen that reminded them perhaps of something in their mum's kitchen, or, you know, just something that triggered the memories, just as, of course, music does and scents do to us all, I think. And it just confirmed that there was potential for us trying to develop something out of the archive that we had. So at the end of this 2-year period, we decided that the most effective thing for us to do was to begin to put together DVDs, some topic-based DVDs. But what we'd also realized along the way in visiting the various organizations was that they were quite logically being run by younger people, so people from a different generation to those that were enjoying the reminiscence. And therefore, the younger person maybe would not be aware of the sort of questions to ask, because they didn't have the background in what it was like to live in the 1930s, 40s, or 50s, or 60s. And sometimes if we mention the word twin tub washing machine, younger people had no idea, you know, what we were talking about, and all sorts of, you know, things which those of us who are somewhat older would take for granted didn't mean anything to some younger people. So I initially created one reminiscence guide, the idea being, if I hold this up for a moment so we can see what we've got here, we created a reminiscence guide here, and we put the DVDs in just inside the cover, and then we have pages allocated to each of the film clips that we have on the DVDs, with suggesting questions that can be asked once people have watched that particular film clip on the DVD, and suggesting also topics to discuss, and including other background information in the reminiscence guide. For example, television, what were the popular television programs on in the 1950s and 60s in the UK? What were some of the well-known feature films that were in that era, just to give scope for people to chat about other things as well once they'd watched the pieces of film on the DVD. And we realized that it wasn't necessary to have necessarily a long film. Many times the film clips might be 10 minutes long, some even shorter. Cinema commercials we've got, which are much shorter, much longer than the ones are today, but still not very long. And that's all that's required to stimulate the memories and get the conversations going. So we created this first DVD with the reminiscence guide, and we sent it out to about 100 different organizations and said, look, this is what we've created. Please, can you give us your feedback? Which they did very kindly. And it was mostly constructive feedback, which we were able to incorporate in the final version of the DVD. And then we created several more DVDs, and we were invited to put the DVDs forward for the Nursing Times Awards in, I think it was 2017. And we were selected as finalists, which we were very pleased with, because we were up against primarily National Health Service hospital groups and all sorts of things. And there was our little not-for-profit organization coming along and competing with them. So we were pleased with that. But that led to another challenge, which was that some of the care home groups and we met some senior National Health Service executives, and they said, we love the work you're doing, but we would very much like it if you could make the archive films available online for streaming, which of course was something that was in the back of our minds anyway. But you really need a lot more films to be able to do that. And from my perspective, you would need quite a sophisticated streaming platform to be able to do it. So this all happened just at the point when we were thinking of moving from Cornwall to Devon to get quite a bit closer to train services and closer to stores, rather than having to drive 6 hours to get to 6 miles to get to a store. We live only 5 minutes from a store now in our little village. And so we had to put the project on hold for a couple of years while we sold our house, got settled in to the new house eventually, and after I had a heart attack, so I had to recover from that. And then I started looking at potential streaming platforms that we could use. And that was not an easy task, because I listed all sorts of criteria that we would have to be able to use a streaming platform effectively. And I was very fortunate eventually at the end of 2019 to meet the founder of an organization called Imogen, which has created a very interesting technology that is being used by major media companies and by sports organizations to store their audio and video data and other types of metadata. And when I sat down and talked with the founder of this company, whose name is Tony Blake, he immediately understood my objectives, because he was also very much involved in the archive film industry. And so he said that Imogen would be very interested to work with us and help us to adapt their technology to meet our needs. And this conversation had taken place at the end of 2019, and we agreed in February 2020 that we would begin to work together. And then we were faced with COVID. And so that put a different spin on everything, of course, because we were soon faced with lockdown, having to work from home, not get together with anybody. And so I had to first find out how to use the Imogen platform, streaming platform, how we could adapt it to fit in with our own needs, and then to figure out how we were going to use content on it. in both in general terms, but also specifically, I had to learn how to download films from collections and then upload them to this platform, add all the related metadata, etc. And this led us to think, well, there was no way that we could just use the many hundreds of archive films to which we already had access, but we needed to have a much broader range of content available to us. And thanks to both the contacts that Leonora and I had, but also particularly thanks to Tony Blake and his contacts, we were able to enter into agreements with organizations with archive film collections, such as the Imperial War Museums, Bewley National Motor Museum in the UK, Reuters, which has very kindly given us access to their entire archive, going back over 100 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, a lot of that isn't video, but it is all sorts of fascinating newsreels and other content, which is equally relevant for people in this country and many countries around the world. But many other organizations like Screen Ocean, AP, and various companies that have specialist collections. And they have made the content available to us for worldwide streaming only. We are not allowed to download content. And as an international copyright lawyer, I'm very concerned to make sure that we stick within the boundaries of what is legally acceptable. So what we began to do once we'd reached the agreements with these organizations was that we started downloading and uploading, and I had recruited 2 people who worked with me for almost 2 years during the COVID lockdown to begin to build the platform content, and that we completed really in 2022 as far as we could get to have a viable range of content. And we now have close to 2,600 titles on there, which cover, we've broken it down into categories of topics, and it's broken down, I would say, into about 35 key topics, and there are many subtopics. And the great thing is that the Imogen platform has very sophisticated search capabilities. So when we have uploaded each film onto the platform, we have immediately done a speech-to-text conversion, and that text is then provided in the form of subtitles on the films, but it also goes directly into the search engine, which means that if you do a search on the platform, it means that if your topic that you're searching for is actually on one of the videos on the platform, then you will be taken directly to that piece of content on the platform.
Wow. You know, it's amazing. Even just when you were talking, going from DVD to online, and also dealing with, you know, the younger population that doesn't know kind of history and context of what they're seeing. So I love that you pulled together the guides to help people and you know, help kind of set fire to that conversation and that engagement. I think that's so important. And you know, not only are you engaging people with dementia, but what a great learning tool for those that are facilitating and learning history and a little bit about culture and how people engage in what's important to them over time. I think those are big lessons that are being taught as well through your process. When you were talking about converting to online, I just thought of how much it has changed even over the years of, the technology they're using and the numbers of platforms that are out there. I mean, it's just like this constant web out there. I don't know how you sorted it all through.
Yes. No, to me, it's fascinating because I started my career in the American film industry or international film industry in 1972 when I joined Cinema International Corporation in Amsterdam, and that was set up by Paramount and Universal and became the world's largest film distribution company and is now called United International Pictures. And at that stage in 72, there was just cinema and television. And then as my career developed, we began to see the arrival of the video cassette and video discs and then cable television, satellite television, etc., the internet, streaming platforms, as you say. And I had been very fortunate in having spent my entire career in the development of all these different technologies. So I feel very at home dealing with them and having the opportunity to taking advantage of the changes at this late stage in my career. And it is, I think, so interesting that, as you allude to, that the fact that what we've created is really a snapshot of certainly UK social history on the platform. It goes much wider than just UK because there is quite a lot of foreign content on the platform. But it's also being used, I've discovered, by some people who are homeschooling their children. And so it's great, as you suggest, for getting a picture of what history was like, in social history was like, or the way our lives worked in rather differently in decades gone by. And it's, I think, a great opportunity for many of us just to dig back into what life was like in the past. The biggest challenge we have now is that I think we've got a good range of content for people who are very familiar with having grown up in the UK in the 1950s, 60s. But what we are now focusing on is how we can bring together a lot more content for people from different ethnic backgrounds and communities who live in the UK at the moment and have done probably for years, who, as they get older, their minds think back probably to the country in which they were born, if they weren't born in the UK. And so we're beginning to reach out to various other countries, to their national archives and other possible sources, to see if we can build a good range of content that will be of interest to, well, for example, my wife, who was born in Germany and has spent half her life in the UK. But as she thinks of her younger years, as we all do as we get older, I think, her mind goes back to life in Hamburg. And so we're beginning to talk now with an organization called Common Age, which is a British Commonwealth organization that is concerned to represent the the interests of people who are living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia across the Commonwealth. And importantly, I think, to begin to record the life stories of older people in different Commonwealth countries. And one of the great things is that the Imogen platform not only has the capabilities that I've just been describing to you, that we're using at the moment, but it also has the possibility of being adapted in many ways that will meet our needs. So we can also upload all sorts of audio and video content from other sources and make them available. And we would be a great resource for people's life stories as well.
That's fantastic. I love the expansion because, when you're talking about this community or that community, everyone does have different triggers, and their culture and their backgrounds make such a big difference. And today I know here in the US, politically, people are trying to squash true history. And it's kind of like, come on, everybody has a right to their own history and what that meant to them. And to me, it's a very, very important piece of who we are and who we've become. Our past is very important. And so I like that you're really looking at expanding that to make it whole and accessible and engaging to everyone.
Yes.
Because there's something we can learn from each other's history.
Absolutely.
And to me, I think that's very, very important.
Yes. And I've been fortunate in that I spent some years working frequently in the Caribbean, for example, working with the development of digital technology in some of the island, Leeward and Windward Islands particularly. And so I've have some familiarity with stories about life in the islands. And there are now so many Caribbean diaspora where in the UK particularly, and in the States and in many other countries as well. And I would love to bring together an archive of content on Living Memories Online that would be of value to people who are interested in the Caribbean, for example. Mm-hmm. And they could be sitting anywhere in the world, and they would have access to the platform. And that is, that is possible now because the platform is available worldwide. Living Memories C.I.C. is a not-for-profit organization incorporated under UK law, and our aim is to cover the costs. We have to pay obviously certain core costs for platform, for licenses, etc., and have to engage people to work with us. And I'm afraid that thanks to the problems related primarily to COVID, but not exclusively, it is quite difficult now, we find, to get volunteers to work with us. So I think it's only appropriate that in these particular economic times as well, that we are able to pay people who provide services for us and work with us. But with the technology that we're using, we can have people anywhere who can work with us. And we have one person who started working with us about 3 years ago, and she was then living in the UK. She's now living in the States, and she's still working with us part-time. So, we could say we're truly international. We have a very small core team, but it's an international core team.
Well, that's fantastic. And I just think it's important that everybody understands what it is you're doing and what it offers. And I also think it's sad that it's harder to get volunteers. I was hoping with COVID, people kind of came out of the woodwork anyways over in the US and seemed to really understand the need for volunteerism and what they got out of it. And I was hoping that would continue afterwards. But boy, people go back to their old routines real quickly.
Yes.
Which is too bad, because to me, I think that's one of the things the world is missing right now, is that sense of community and doing something because it's the right thing to do, not just because you're getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a big lack right now in that, and I think it shows in society as a whole.
Yes.
Treat one another and what we value. Well, like I said, I am so impressed with what you're doing. Is there anything else that you're looking at doing in the future here? I mean, it looks like you're just looking at expanding more and more all the time.
No, I think what we've also done is, I mean, we've been creating Living Memories online, and we started out with the DVDs, as we've discussed. And I think it's worth mentioning that although some people say, well, you don't need the DVDs now, you've got the online platform, but that in fact is proving not to be the case, because there are still quite a lot of people who don't want to use the internet. They don't trust it, or they don't have the capability of understanding it. There are also quite a few locations, certainly in the UK. I can't speak for other countries, but in the UK, there are locations where there is no Wi-Fi access. This applies, I know, in quite a number of care homes, where they're in older buildings with very thick walls, and therefore it's not always easy to penetrate those walls with the Wi-Fi signals, and they haven't been set up to adapt to fit to have access fully. So the DVDs are still relevant, and are also a good backup, because we have cases now where, I mean, we've had a very good relationship with the Abbeyfield Care Home Society across the UK since we started the project, and the late chairman of Abbeyfield Society in the UK and internationally became a great champion for the work that we were doing. But very sadly, he died unexpectedly a couple of years ago. And fortunately, our relationship with Abbeyfield has continued, and Paul Bolt, who works with Abbeyfield but also is a fellow director of Living Memories C.I.C. He has ensured, and Abbeyfield has ensured, that they had the capability of helping us to develop our Memories reminiscence groups, because when Leonora and I moved to the village we're living in now, which is called Colleton, when we arrived, we got to know the area. It's got a population of something over 2,000. And we realized that quite a few of those residents were older people who lived on their own and weren't going out very much, even before COVID. And so in 2018, we decided to start a group in the village, offering to show the archive films to a group which we call Memories Reminiscence Group. And so we put up posters on the telegraph poles in the village, which is the standard way of advertising in Colleton. So we got our drawing pins out and stuck the posters up. And we were getting about 20 to 25 people for every meeting, aged between 60 and over 100. And we would get together, sit around the table and watch one or two short archive films. And then the conversation we didn't have to stimulate the conversation. It just flowed. And so we would just sit, have tea and biscuits and lots of memories. And the great thing was that we found that having those people sitting around the table, they may well have known each other by sight. Even in a small community, you don't know everybody. And you know some people by name and others you just say good morning to. And by sitting down together around a table and talking about memories, we found that some people discovered that their neighbor who lived maybe down the street was actually born in the same area of South London as they were. And so what we say now, we're creating memory buddies.
Oh, that's great. And those little connections make such a huge difference in somebody's life. I mean, they fill their soul and, they just blossom.
Yes. And so, they then have the opportunity of, they can get together outside the meeting and they can go for a coffee together or invite each other, to pop round for a cup of tea and a scone, and share their memories of their younger years. The other thing that, so we started that as a pilot project, and that has now been taken up by the Abbeyfield Care Home Group, and they're setting up tea and memory groups in their care homes and beginning to invite local residents in to join them in some of those groups. And there's an example of Living Memories online of one of our tea and memory groups. There's a short video about that, which I can show you in a moment, just how to come to it. And what we're also, I'm just thinking about the possibility that we have a pilot project, which we call Living Memories at Home, or Tea and Memories at Home, because we found that there are people who simply cannot get out of their homes because of certain disabilities to come and join us in a community group in the town hall or village centre. So what we're hoping we can do is to train some 2 or 3 people to run reminiscence sessions, and then they can go with a tablet, digital tablet, and take them to people's homes and run a reminiscence session for the people in their homes, and that person can then invite several of their neighbors to join in the group if they want to, and so they can have a mini reminiscence group as well. So that's where we're calling that Tea and Memories at Home, and we've run a couple of pilot sessions of that, and that has worked very well particularly for so far the pilots have been with people who've developed dementia, are no longer able to come to our community reminiscence group, but they're happy to be in their home and have 2 or 3 neighbors come in and join them to watch the films and then chat about things.
Oh, nice. That's gosh, what a nice, diverse, well-rounded program you have to be able to reach people.
Yes, and the idea with the Tea and Memories group, and I think with the Tea and Memories at Home concept, is that we develop those as social franchises, and that means that there's there's no interest in trying to make lots of money out of this. This is really to, for communities to take the project on. We will be able to help them to set up the group, and then there'll be newsletters, and they will have the possibility of joining up with other groups around the country or in other countries. Because one of the benefits that I haven't mentioned of Living Memories Online is that you have the capability of setting, when you go in and you watch the films, then if there's one or more that you are either personally very interested in, or you're planning a reminiscence session and on a given topic, and you want to say have 3 or 4 of those films on that topic, you can add them into your collection, and you can build a collection on the platform. And if you want to, you can send those via email, a link to somebody else who is also a subscriber. So, for example, if you have a family member, an older family member perhaps, who would be interested in films that we have on the platform about a certain topic, then you could assemble them for them, send them an email, and they'll be able to watch those films then, and you could have a chat with them on Zoom, or you could just have a phone call with them after they've watched them and have a reminiscence session about them. And okay, so this is the Living Memories Online website. We've created this really, and it's still in development. The aim is to bring our Living Memories Online website together with the store, which gives the capability of buying the DVDs and the reminiscence guides. And in the near future, hopefully we can develop this further. So if you want to go through to Living Memories Online, you do it this way. And you can obviously go back to Living Memories Online on its own. So if you're interested in seeing how Living Memories Online is developing generally, then you would come to livingmemoriesonline.com, which is still in development and is designed to bring together our various resources and services. So at the moment, what we have on here is, if you click on Living Memories Online, that takes you to the streaming platform for anybody who wants to look at the 2,500 plus archive films for reminiscence. Or if you want to look at some of the DVDs, you can see them here and you can buy them. What we're also doing is looking at, we have here brief details about our work in developing the TM Memories reminiscence groups. What we're also looking at the moment is expanding the possibility of not only using Living Memories Online, but also separately from Living Memories Online. We see that there are still a lot of people who would love to have the opportunity to chat with others about life in the past, maybe on a specific subject, but they can't get out of their home. They maybe would rather meet with people elsewhere. And so we're looking into the possibility of developing our Living Memories work into a form of TN Memories Online, which would mean that we're running reminiscence sessions online for people anywhere. So if we will set up a system where anybody maybe once a month would like to get together with other people with similar interests, and we would watch a couple of archive films, and then we would chat about them. So the groups that we're talking about probably wouldn't be more than 25 people. And we would share our thoughts after we've watched the archive films, and our reminiscences, of course. And that can apply to people from anywhere in the world. So what we've done so far, there was a trial group which we ran online, was a reminiscence session involving residents of the care home run by Abbeyfield in Sidmouth in Devon in the UK. And they got together online with residents living in the Abbeyfield care home in Vancouver in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And they watched some of the films on Living Memories online, and then they chatted with each other. Mm-hmm. And that worked very, very well. And so we can run the same concept by saying, you can have a monthly subscription for a reminiscence session. It will cost you maybe £5, let's say. And then you can get together with other people. We'll watch a couple of films. We'll have some notes, and you will subscribe to newsletters, etc. And it might be somebody in the UK. It might be lots of people in the UK who are taking part. It might be people from various countries, from the US and UK, because there are so many people who started their lives in the UK and then relocated to another country around the world, but they're still interested in keeping in touch with people. So that we will be including soon, hopefully, details about that on this livingmemoriesonline.com website.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. I'm so glad we got together today. I'm anxious for people to learn about your product and all the different benefits that it can have on so many different levels. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to touch on? I know we've been yapping a while now.
No, I think we've pretty well covered things, Laurie. I the only thing I mentioned to you before we started talking, but I've just come out of hospital, was there for about 10 days, and I took the opportunity on several occasions of, particularly I could identify patients who were in the early stages of dementia development. And I sat down with them, and on one occasion with some visitors that this guy had, and we did some reminiscence, and they really enjoyed it. And I even got an email a few days later from one of the visitors to say how much he'd appreciated the session, because the last thing he had expected was a reminiscence session when he'd gone to visit an old friend in hospital. But it was welcome.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Well, like I said, there's just so many ways that this can be used. It's just a really a powerful, powerful tool, and I think it'll help so many. In wrapping up, I just want to say to our audience that I hope you found this information with Living Memories with Brian Norris as valuable as I did. And I hope that you will like, click, and share and be a giver of hope. It doesn't take any time to do that. And so many people need to get connected to so many products and services and tools that are out there, but they just don't know how to find them. And by you sharing this episode, it can make a really big difference in a lot of people's lives, because there's probably a lot of people in your own sphere of influence that are dealing with dementia that you don't even know about, because people are still uncomfortable having the conversation, and that needs to change. So be a giver of hope, help spread the word. And you can always visit them at their website. You can go to livingmemoriesonline.com, or you can go to livingmemories.imogencloud.com. They are on Facebook. They are on Twitter, now known as X. I still can't get used to that whole change. And you can also visit Brian via LinkedIn. Just go to Brian Norris 1 and you can find him there. And again, check it out. Bop around the website, see what you think. Maybe you want to purchase a DVD, or maybe you want to subscribe to the online information. Maybe there's a group or a community that you think this would be really valuable to. So, don't be shy about it. We have to share our knowledge once we get it. That's how we build community. That's how we create comfort. That's how we help people engage and feel purposeful in life. So take that step and help us out and spread the word. Thanks, everybody. We will talk to you next time. And Brian, again, thank you for all you've done for so many people living with dementia. It's amazing.
Thank you for your great work as well, Laurie. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.